I want to acknowledge that there's a difference about saying things about yourself that other people may not be willing to share about themselves and confusing that for vulnerability. And I think I am successful at being an interesting, entertaining person because there's a level of shamelessness I can have about myself that does not involve me being vulnerable. Because I might just not mind sharing it. And I think as I've approached this last week, thinking about this podcast, New Problems, and thinking about the story I know I want to share, and having lived that story, like in my physical body, and gone to the computer multiple times, I understand what makes it not easy. And it's never easy, but really what makes it not easy is that it is asking me to be vulnerable and not just say things you might want to hear and might not want to say yourself. So it's a challenge. These last few weeks, obviously I took some time off, but in the kind of intermittent weeks before, I went to the West Coast, and these last two episodes, I'm really doing a deep dive into what my faith tradition, Christianity, calls the gift of abiding. This notion that I rest in identity, love, and community. If you didn't know what all these episodes were about, I just told you. That was the quote unquote sermon series. That's what we've been talking about. Abiding and the challenges of abiding and how disconnected I feel. And this week, I have lived in my physical body the experience of feeling more disconnected than I've ever felt in my life. And so that's not a fun thing to relive. And I don't want to make that elegant. I don't want to do that again. I actually just want to move forward. I want to move forward to like next Monday when this is over. But having been given just these little seeds of Robert, you're fine. Robert, you're fine. Robert, you're fine in the last hour. Shout out to McLean for the FaceTime. Shout out to the ginger drink that I made. Ginger is actually pretty cheap. You can make it yourself. I've gotten really good at using the peeler in the utility drawer. Peeling squash, peeling sweet potatoes. Now I'm peeling ginger. I'm all about the peeler. So we can get vulnerable. Abiding. This time a year ago, I got to do something for the first time in my life, which was to say I traveled to an irregular location. So this time a year ago and a week before, I had never left the United States, save 2 days in Montreal, Canada, which might as well just been the Bed-Stuy of North America. Like, it was a very interesting cultural place for me to go to, but it was familiar. This time last year, it got a little unfamiliar, and my plan was to fly into Paris and a week later fly out of Amsterdam. And I had to piece together in that week where I wanted to go. which is such a me way to travel, because it was, if I was ever going to leave North America for the first time, it was going to involve me making it more difficult than it needed to be. It needed to be more difficult. And so Paris was like meeting a cousin I'd never met before. I've heard all about you. When I meet you, I can imagine that we have some similarities. I get that we're kind of family. I'm a New Yorker. You're a Paris. Pleased to meet you. We are telling a similar story in our unique way, but I know there is a commonality in our identities that I can experience with a sense of comfort and a sense of good humor. But that was the first 3 days. And I saw, I mean, I'm telling you, when I was in Paris, I was staying in the 7th, if that means anything to you. It didn't mean anything to me. I just Googled and I got a great Airbnb deal. And this is how much of a newbie I was. I didn't realize that the Eiffel Tower lit up at night. Like, I showed up, I'm walking around, I'm like, oh my gosh, look at that. It's like bright like an diamond. And so Paris is the familiar cousin that I'm just walking around and I'm drinking and I'm getting excessive amounts of coffee, and I did the bike share, and I went to this beautiful little chapel, Jean Chapelle, and I did my life in New York in Paris. The same kind of bars, same sort of cafes. I love a good ham sandwich, so I will eat a ham croissant anytime. I Scott's Cheap Flights just put out a Paris deal, and I'm just like, Robert, you'll spend that much in New York that weekend, so you might as well just buy one next September. Why not? So that's how I think about Paris. It was my first time out of the United States, was actually me living my life as myself, just in a different place for the first time. The miracle that I experienced was after those 3 days in Paris, and I thought, where to next? And I look at the map. My dream place to take a train from that location would have been Brussels. And the long story short is, I did a radio show in college with a woman from Brussels. I just really respect her and think she's a really cool lady. So I just had this concept of Belgium in my life for at least 10 years. And I like beer. Okay, Belgium. But it just didn't work out. Okay, Berlin. Berlin felt like another city where I am living life like myself and am going to navigate it as such. So that wasn't going to work necessarily, because I think I was just tired. Like, I was exhausted. So I said, Robert, what's the city that is closest to Paris you can get to by train, and it won't feel familiar in a way New York City or Paris would feel familiar? And so I went to Geneva, Switzerland. I don't know how much you know about Geneva, Switzerland. I think politically, historically, there's a role for it in society and in the European continent. I would compare it to, if Europe is a college, Geneva, Switzerland is the bursar's office. It is strictly the most boring parts of Washington, D.C., like the Watergate building. Geneva, Switzerland is the Watergate building of Europe. And it's next to a really beautiful lake. So I don't know anything about Geneva, but I just Maybe I'm just so hipster Brooklyn type that I want to just be able to say I have been to Geneva, Switzerland, so I'm going to go. And that day, it was actually really, really special because Coldplay put out their new album, Everyday Life, and I'm on this train, and the train was late, so I was a little stressed out about that. But it's just like I took the most magical photo at this rail station in Paris, and I'm just waiting for the train with all these people, and it really felt that is when my trip outside of North America really began at that train platform. And I've got this album, and I've got my seat on this train, and I just see rolling, rolling green in little villages. And I realized in that moment, I am now on my own. And if there was a destination I would not recommend if you realize that you're on your own, it's Geneva, Switzerland. It was the worst destination I could have picked in that moment because it struck me how strong the feeling of being disconnected from anywhere you belong. I did not belong in Paris, even though I felt I did. I did not belong on that train, even though I paid the ticket. And when I arrived in Geneva, Switzerland, I am not a bureaucrat. I am not a proud member of the European Union, even though I'm guessing Switzerland's not a part of the European Union. Whatever. Altogether, Geneva, Switzerland is cobblestones and crows. That's it. Geneva, Switzerland is cobblestone and crows. And I spent 2.5 days wandering these cobblestones, and I knew that no one in the world knew where I was. And thus, if anything happened to me, no one would know. No one would know how to find me. No one would know who to call. And that realization is twofold. It's one, you are disconnected, and two, every person that you've ever cared about, thought cared about you, is living life completely without you and completely normally. No one's rhythm was changed because I went to Geneva, Switzerland. And that was brutal to remember and recognize. It was, I am in a city that I have zero affection for, that has zero affection for me. And nobody's going to care. And I had to sit with that. And Geneva, Switzerland gave me the space to sit with that. And it's a feeling I will never forget. I am just sitting in this random swing overlooking cobblestone streets with mountains yonder. I'm swinging on the swing, and it just hits me. My brain is a radio station, and every existential angst is cranked up, and every radio station that wants to bleed into my main feed is bleeding in, and I am just a carnival of emotional confusion. Because I truly was living the distinction between being alone and lonely. Which isn't to say I had the worst time in Geneva. That's not true. I think from a spiritual perspective, it's one of the most powerful days I've ever had in my life. I would not recommend it, but it has shifted how I understand my life, my feelings, what I truly would pray for in this world. And it's truly that sense of this is where I belong. That's it. If there is an opposite feeling to me being in Geneva, Switzerland, that is the gift that God could give me. Not saying it's the terrible city. I had great memories there. I went to the most incredible cocktail bar that I think really raised my consciousness to a cocktail. I loved sitting by a lake. It is mesmerizing. I am now a lake city by person. There was this cathedral that had a classical performance that Saturday night. And if it's like, let's say 3 stories high, the tiers are all lit in candlelight. Imagine a cathedral in Geneva, Switzerland. Yeah, it looked like that. Now imagine it lit in candle with beautiful violin music playing in the front. And I'm just taking a seat on the pew and no one is asking me any questions. And I'm looking up, realizing if there is any God in this space, it literally is just the light of one candle. That telephone. And if that was the only light I was going to get, that was the light I was 100% going to take. I believe that this week, 1 year later, is me understanding just how much like Geneva, Switzerland, my 2020 has been. It is fitting this 1 year anniversary of that week away that I get to reflect and live that headspace now. Because my sense of abiding, of not belonging, is so apparent. And yet I am doing it in my own city. I am doing it in the streets that do feel familiar. I am doing it on the neighborhoods and through the subways that I have so many things that feel like something I remember, and yet they have either moved on without me, they do not notice I am not around, or they are not around themselves. And that's hard. I was walking through Williamsburg, Brooklyn 2 nights ago, trying to find a beer alone. Back when drinking alone was the thing that I did. I just needed to kill an hour. And between the COVID and the thermometers, and there has to be a 2 person minimum, and that place is closed, and that place isn't open, and that place is closed, and oh, that place is shut down. And it's just me wandering through a city I know and I thought was the place where I abide. And I don't even have that anymore. And that's tough. I think about losing my sense of abiding in my church for so many reasons. You're just like, what? I can't be in that space. I can't be on that prayer call. I can't be in that church picnic. Like, what are we talking about? What? Next week is Thanksgiving. I think, Robert, you have places you can go, but like, where do you actually, what's the table you belong at? What? my sense of abiding is so off. And that is not my story. I think that's the 2020 story. If you were abiding in a concept of what your future could be, yeah, that's done. If you were abiding in your sense of who is important to you, you might have lost people that really matter through illness, through the economy, just through the kind of safety that only happens when you isolate yourself and are isolated from other people. This is tough. And so I'm sitting in a room on Willoughby Avenue with a very inadequate window. And I'm just like, what am I plugged into? And that sucks. That Geneva feeling is just so strong. And out, but it's in here, and I don't want to, and I could just sit with this, and I could just, because I am sitting with this. I am sitting with this. I'm sitting with this. So I don't want to just end with something like light at the end of the tunnel or positive or everything's gonna be okay. But I will say I have been given one insight, and I think it's a gift that I've got to live, which is the understanding that a sense of home truly is a gift to be had, no question. But it's also really a gift to be given. And I think when I think of the purposes of God in the people I care about and in my community, God is using me to create a sense of home for other people. That is my commitment to my life. Some people want to call it the gift of presence, the gift of belonging, the gift of hospitality, whatever angle you want to take it from. It's people are feeling so cut off. Robert, how do you give the invitation to abide, to rest, to dwell, and furthermore, to dwell in possibility? That is the gift to be given. To dwell in possibility with your own creativity, profession, vocation, to dwell in possibility with people who understand what's important to you and can nurture that, to people with a sense of curiosity and spiritual practice and spiritual thinking that you can learn from and model after, to dwell in possibility. That's the gift to be given. That's the thing I'm committed to. And of all my and as my sense of abiding is cut off again and again, I also realized God can't waste me, and God can't waste you. God can't waste you. God can't waste me. I'm going to tell you a story. A few weeks back, and I don't want to disrespect anyone. I don't want to disrespect anyone in the story. I went to a random church's newcomer thing in the neighborhood. They're just doing a thing. Happens. Come to the backyard and there'll be drinks and just people from YouTube church. I don't know any of these people. These people have no idea who I am. But I go because the host was black, which I think makes a difference. And I have to be honest, it was probably the worst hour of my life, with people who were talking about like local bedside politics and urban farming, and it was the most non it was not no one has facilitated a conversation with less intention. And I think it's not personal. It's not, I'm not trying to be mean, but I'm just saying, because it's not easy in a pandemic to meet strangers, and if you're out of practice, it's out of practice. So I'm really not blaming anyone. I'm just saying, on the recipient end of it, it was the most miserable thing I've ever been a part of. It was very Geneva. It was like church Geneva. But and my body language is terrible, and I'm cursing these people in my mind, and I'm so upset, and I'm like, oh, I hate these people. Like, I used to have a church that was so beautiful, and people liked me, and I like them, and I could be myself, and now I'm just like, I'm just too cute and cool for all this, and I'm just so deeply unhappy. And when I say an hour when you're unhappy is a long time. So let's not just like move on to the rest of the story. I like sat in that. I sat eating an ice cream sandwich because that's my go-to thing when you go to a group thing. Bring an ice cream sandwich. I'm eating an ice cream sandwich, and I'm confused by this church event where no one's talking about church, spiritual things, prayer, feelings, emotions. We're talking about who was voted out of the City Assembly District 48 in Inwood, Manhattan. What are we talking about? I was so unhappy. I'm so deeply unhappy. After this hour, it just hits me. It's like, Robert, you're unhappy, but this is kind of what you do. You sit in rooms and Zooms with strangers and you get them to talk about themselves with each other. This is literally God's gracious will for your life. Robert, get a grip. Yes, this isn't my church. Yes, this isn't my event. I get it. Guess what? Do you, boo? So I have to respectfully sit everyone down and facilitate the conversation like someone who has a clue. And the event ceased to suck. And there were really wonderful people, and every person who I had been cursing out an hour before, the next hour I really get to understand kind of what they're there for and what their history is like, and my sense of compassion and empathy is activated. And I just think people need opportunities to kind of share and be seen and like express things that are important to them in non-judgmental spaces. I have to go run off, and the beautiful black host, she says to me, next time I host something. She doesn't sound like that. I don't need to give her the stupid voice. She says, next time I host something, I hope you're there, because you're good at this. But next time we need you to start talking about yourself. And I said, maybe. So as we wrap up many episodes on abiding and the gift of abiding, I guess I would go back to a notion that was really important to me, actually, when I was in the West Coast. And we read from Psalm 104. I mean, I probably read it at least 4 or 5 times when I was out there, because it's truly in just this sequence of Psalms about kind of the gratitude that comes from our place in the physical world, which is very much kind of what that trip and that journey was about. Psalm 104, I'm just going to read just a few verses. I'm just going to read a few. Oh Lord, how manifold are your works. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. Here is the sea, great and wide, which teems with creatures innumerable, living things both great and small. There go the ships and Leviathan, which you formed to play in it. These all look to you to give them their food in due season. When you give it to them, they gather it up. When you open your hand, they are filled with good things. When you hide your face, they are dismayed. When you take away their breath, they die and return to their dust. When you send forth your spirit, they are created, and you renew the face of the ground. You cause the grass to grow for the livestock and plants for man to cultivate, that he may bring forth food from the earth, and wine to gladden the heart of man, oil to make his face shine, and bread to strengthen man's heart. The trees of the Lord are watered abundantly, the cedars of Lebanon that he planted. In them the birds build their nest. The stork has her home in the fir trees. The high mountains are for wild goats, and rocks are a refuge for the rock badgers. I will sing to the Lord as long as I live. I will sing praise to my God while I have my being. May the glory of the Lord endure forever. May the Lord rejoice in his works. The miracle of Psalm 104 is not that the creatures of the earth, that I consider myself one, are given a place to be safe. It's that the creatures of the earth are the safe places for other people. It is the tree that makes the home for the bird. It is the mountain that makes the home for the goat. It is the grass for the livestock. It is the trees that are watered so that the storks have nests. I think so much about my sense of abiding being so fragile. In the best of times, it feels fragile. And in 2020, I might as well be in Geneva, Switzerland. And then I realized, with just the candlelight of faith that I have, Robert, you are the home for someone else. When in Isaiah, we are called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord. Oaks is not God showing off. Oaks are God's way to express love to the creatures around you. Because oaks are not showing off. Oaks are homes. And that's special. And so if I'm ever back in Geneva, I will know better. I will know that it is the most expensive place on earth. I will know to go with a friend. But I will also know, no matter where I go, if there is someone nearby that wants to be seen and to express what's important to them, I am the perfect person, and I am Geneva, Switzerland's best option for that conversation. And that is the glory of God shining forever. So thank you for letting me have this forum to both express what feels difficult, but express the kind of delight in knowing that having me around is God's best option for so many people around. And I just want to say, yes.